to the computer.
There you go.
Yes. So today, our topic, as you can see, is a blocked path. But before we talk about the blocked path, I wanted to consider the perceived threat that preceded this story, okay? So we begin with the Israelites wandering in the wilderness, which, if you were here last time I actually did a class, probably a month ago, that was the last one we talked about. They were wandering, and they didn't know whether they were leaving Egypt or arriving in a promised land, or what was their motive. They were lost. So because they didn't know their motive, they spent 40 years walking around in circles. In Exodus 16, it says the 40 years, also in Joshua 1, it talks about the 40 years of wandering in the wilderness was when the children of Israel would not believe in the promises of God, and they desired to go back to the land of Egypt and into slavery again. Now, I don't know why anybody would want to go back into slavery. That's just, it's not cool. Yeah, the food is there, and yeah, they give you some place to sleep, but they also let you have no personal liberties, none. It's like, why would you want that? But that's what they were doing, and they spent the whole time walking in circles, really, because if you look at the distance they traveled in that 40 years, they could have done that in 6 months. All however many thousands. Yeah, it really was not that far, but they were walking in circles because I believe God just wouldn't let them see the direction because they weren't listening. Kind of like clouded their vision. So when they came to Kadesh Barnea to look over the land that God had promised them, they finally got to the borders, like, there it is, there's the land. Then they became afraid. It's like, oh, we can't go over there. There are giants in the land. Oh, we can't go over there. There are lots of people there already. We can't go over there. Those people have armies. And keep in mind, these people were not armies. They were slaves. Some of them probably were slaves with military equipment, but most of them were slaves with making bricks and building pyramids. So they became afraid, and only Joshua and Caleb had the courage to move with the promises of God. That lack of faith caused them to wander in the wilderness all those 40 years, and there they are, finally at the edge, not willing to move forward. That's kind of what they looked like, wandering around. Joshua and Caleb spied out the land, and that led to a change in leadership. So this is actually not crossing the Red Sea. This is crossing the Jordan. You see Joshua in front, in the middle of where the river should be flowing, with his hands raised. He, as the follower to Moses, was also given the authority of God to do the kinds of miracles that Moses had done. So Joshua stepped out and stopped the river from flowing. It's a much smaller river. It's not like the Red Sea, but still he stopped the water from flowing so that they could walk across. And they, in fact, someone from each tribe picked up a stone from the riverbed and carried it across. And they made an altar with these 12 stones out of the middle of the riverbed. I don't know if you knew that, but something that just crossed my mind while I was talking.
I remember
that. So Joshua became the Israelites' leader. Moses and the older people remained in the wilderness. They were prohibited by God to enter the promised land, which was because they didn't listen. When God said, just do what I say, go this way, they said, oh, no, God's not going to provide. Oh, wait a minute, why are we getting manna? I want to just go out and get some lamb. They complained about everything. And then even when God said to Moses, speak to the rock to give you water, he hit the rock. There, see, I gave you water. No, God said, speak, and the water will come forth. So none of the older ones were allowed to go into the promised land because they weren't ready. Excuse excuse me, they hadn't been ready at the beginning of their trip, and now it's 40 years later, and they'd spent the whole 40 years mumbling, grumbling, and even threatening to not go with Joshua when he was ready to go. Demonstrating his authority, Joshua parted the much smaller Jordan River in the way that Moses had previously parted the Red Sea. So now, when you think about these people arriving, you got to think about exponential population growth. If you had 100 people and they walked around for 40 years and they only grew by 0.2%, you'd have 222 people at the end of 40 years, more than double, okay? So consider, I don't know how many people there were. It says our current population growth rate is about 1.05% right now. The current average increase is estimated at 81 million people per year. And when I looked at an article on how many people left Egypt with Moses, I got a lot of confusing things because there are lots of guesses. Multiple interpretations offered differing numbers, but one of them was the idea of a people group growing from 70 to more than 2 million in 430 years. So start at the beginning when Joseph and his coat of many colors got sent down there to Egypt, and there were about 70 people when he finally brought his family in because of the drought. So about 70 people. And in 430 years, that could have grown to 2 million people. That's not implausible. So that would be why the Egyptians weren't amused. It's like, wait a minute, you guys, there are just too many of you now. You keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger. So it would require population growth rate of 2.6% to get that high. But that's not extraordinary, and it's not too far beyond the 2.2 rate seen worldwide in the middle of the 20th century. Biblical references to Israel's increase and Egypt's corresponding fear probably reflects that level of explosive growth, okay? Now, if there had only been growth and natural attrition, conservative numbers would put the Israelites at maybe 208,000 people after 40 years in the wilderness. That's with babies born, old people dying, maybe some people got sick or injured, you know, so there's lots of different ways that they could have, the numbers would go up and down. So there are two major losses of life recorded in the thousands during their wilderness trek. And all of this I know is tedious numbers, but it intrigues me, and you kind of need it for the background of where we're going. Okay, so one of the times that they would have lost people is when they created the golden calf. I don't know if you remember reading that story to the end, but it says that God wiped out a whole bunch of them. It's like, yes, that would sort of bring the numbers down. And then again, there were some plagues that came to the Israelites in the wilderness. So plagues knocked the numbers down. So periodically, the numbers were diminished. So if we use more moderate growth rates, and like I said, there were numerous theories, and I only took one of them. If you use those moderate growth rates, track the loss of life through plagues, the fact that the count of the dead would include non-Israelites. So you might say there were 40,000 dead, but not counting the fact that 20,000 of them were extra people who also wanted to escape Egypt and came along for the ride. Okay. So the census numbers counted both all the Israelites, and the death numbers counted the Israelites plus the extra people. So you could assume 23,000 killed in the golden calf incident, which was before the first census. And then you could say that after the plagues and all, another 24,000 might have been killed. So, you know, there are other theories about the number, but without going into detail, we're going to say that we have 208,000 with only a mere 22,200 fighting males would be 500 fighting males. So only 500 soldiers amongst the whole crowd, okay? Now,
Wow.
that's
I
important
have a question.
because, yes.
With COVID happening and all the people that died from that, is that kind of like God's work too? Or when they start from, could we compare it to what you were just talking about with the census?
You can certainly compare it to the plagues. We can't say what the motivation was and whether God sent it or somebody else sent it or it just happened. We can't say. But yeah, you can compare it to the plagues in that when a plague happened, it happened across a whole population and a whole lot of people were affected.
Okay.
And a whole lot of people, yeah, and a whole lot of people were not affected. You know, I heard something the other day. You would not believe this. It was a Christian media company that said that their media outlet suddenly is being impacted by COVID because they said something about somebody trans, and it's the trans people cursing them. It's the devil doing it, not God.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So, you know, I am not going into motives. I don't know. Personally, I think sickness is just part of the way the planet operates. So I just think that these things happen. Sometimes they happen to a small segment of society or a certain part of the country or a certain part of the world. Sometimes they're worldwide, and worldwide is probably going to be more likely with the kinds of travel that we've added. You know, when I was in high school, I would just after high school, I went on a tour with a choir that allowed me to fly to Europe. And I was absolutely sure that I would never have the opportunity to be in an airplane again. Just, you know, it's like flying was so expensive. It took me a year to raise, or 6 months to raise enough money to be my portion, knowing that this nonprofit organization was funding the balance of the trip. And, you know, I just could not see that I would fly again. And then couldn't have been more than 5, 6 years later, I had a job, I had a conference to go to. It's just, the world has changed so much. People who flew in the 50s and 60s were rich people, a very small part of the population, and now everybody flies. So yeah, these things, they're going to spread around the world a whole lot. Okay, so when you think of, say, 22,000 people moving into the neighborhood, that would look like a formidable horde taking over the countryside. All these people suddenly moving on the neighborhood. In our current time, the way you can think about that would be there are currently 275,000 undocumented immigrants in the state of Arizona. This is actually 2016. So 275,000.
Oh, wow.
That is undocumented. That's 28% of the immigrants in the state. Out of the entire state population, wow, it's only 4% of the whole state population. So it sounds like this huge crowd of people moving in on us, but it's really only 4% of the total state population. Not many people at all. It'd be 4 out of every 100 people. Another thing to look at would be homelessness. When you drive through downtown on Jefferson from 7th Avenue to, say, to 7th Street, just before you get to the courthouses on the south side of the street, there are several streets in a row where they have tents, where people have set up their tents to sleep at night. And homelessness down there, it looks huge. It's like a tent city. It's like, well, where do all these people come from? But when you count the numbers, 7,419 homeless in Phoenix, 7,000 people. How many millions of people are in Phoenix? It's not a huge
Wow.
crowd, but it is a huge problem. And then only half of those people are actually out on the street, because the other half, 3,200 of them, are in shelters or maybe with a family friend or something. You know, when I was in Oregon, our guitarist and her family were temporarily homeless. And I remember they would spend 1 week at the one sister's house, then they'd spend a week at the other sister's house, and then they'd spend a week in a motel, because all of the rental properties had rules that you couldn't have house guests for more than 7 days. So they would really
wow.
fill up this house, and then they'd move to this other house and really fill it up, and then they'd move to a motel room, which, you know, when you think, oh yeah, motel room, that's not too bad, but we're talking about a father and mother, 3 boys and a little girl. That was a lot of people in a hotel room for a whole week, you know, and that's how many people would just have to bounce around. So effectively they were homeless, even though they were not on the street. So only half of the homeless are on the street, but when you see them, it looks like this massive crowd. In fact, you don't even always see the people, you see tents, and it feels like a massive crowd. So from 2019 and 20, the unsheltered count increased by 18%. So that's, you know, it's a frightening thing. And what we become frightened of, we worry about crime or jobs or services, you know, especially when they're talking about undocumented immigrants. Who's going to take these jobs away from us? 4% of the population. Let me see, if 4 people get a job, I think the other 96 of us are still working. That may not be a problem. But there's this fear, unreasonable fear, that comes from crowds coming in, okay? So I have a question for you. Think about a time when things just seemed to go your way. How did you feel when things were going your way? And did it change the way you approached obstacles?
I think, can you hear me?
Just barely.
Yes. Just barely. I don't know. I can't turn my thing up any farther.
Oh, I'll turn mine up. You'll just be loud over here.
Okay.
Okay.
I think if things are going well, you have a tendency to have a little better attitude in your heart and in your head. And things, you think you can do more, you know, you can handle it. You can do this and that.
I saw her coming. That's my neighbor.
You're fine.
She knocks, the dog's back. And the one dog is crazy, so she doesn't stop. So she's outside.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. Yeah, I got one outside, one inside. I think we can continue. Okay, so you were saying that when things are going your way, you have a better attitude, you feel better about things.
Right, right. Whereas if the opposite happens, then you have a tendency to think, oh my, how am I going to ever get through this?
Mm-hmm.
You know, the negative comes out in that instance.
Yes.
I agree.
How I am.
So when
Start
things are
second
going
guessing
good,
everything.
would you say, Tracy?
I was like, it's like you second guess yourself. It's like you second guess yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. When things are going your way and you have a better attitude, does it change the way you approach obstacles?
For me, it does.
Yeah, I think so.
Mm-hmm.
You have more confidence in yourself, and
Yep.
Okay, so all of this stuff is happening as the Israelites are entering Canaan, which is a land of several tribal groups. And in fact, each of those tribal groups had a king with a little k, And the Israelites had moved past some of those tribes when they approached the land in our story today. And believe it or not, all of that leads us up to our story today. But the first lesson we have is that progress for us is not always welcomed by others. So residents of an area may feel like they're being overrun, even when the numbers are not very large. And I think that's because we fear the unknown.
Yeah.
So
Yep.
now, here are people crossing.
You're in the desert.
Yes, they're crossing the Jordan River on dry land, mind you. So Numbers 22, it says, Moab said to the elders of Midian, this horde will now lick up all that is around us as the ox licks up the grass of the field. So Balak, the son of Zippor, who was king of Moab at that time, sent messengers to Balaam, the son of Beor, at Pethor, which is near the river in the land of the people of Ammah, to call him, saying, behold, a people has come out of Egypt. They cover the face of the earth, and they are dwelling opposite me. That's why we were talking about the undocumented and the homeless. You know, it feels like they're covering the face of the earth. Where do all these people come from? But, you know, they were just covering that one hillside, baby, you know. Anyway, he says, come now, curse this people for me, since they are too mighty for me. Perhaps I shall be able to defeat them and drive them from the land, for I know that he whom you bless is blessed, and he whom you curse is cursed. So Balak is the king of Moab, and he talks to all the elders of the area, all the elders of Midian. So he's a king, but he works with a council, and he talked to the whole council, and he said, these guys are going to take up everything. Their oxen are going to eat up all the grass. Everything, all of their sheep and everything is going to just ruin our land. There won't be anything left for us. I'm going to get Balaam to curse them. And the reason he said that is because when Balaam said, you're blessed, a blessing came through. And it didn't occur to the king that maybe there's a reason these blessings fall. The Israelites were seen as a mighty, invincible, invading force. When I think about that, I think about us in a spiritual sense. We are the undocumented immigrants on planet Earth. Our spiritual arrival must be understood from the perspective of those we approach. Let me see what my next picture says. Here, they cover the face of the earth and they are dwelling opposite me. On our newscast, we've seen images of thousands of people approaching American embassies in other countries and surrounding police departments during protests in our own country. How do you think the people inside experience the arrival of large groups of shouting and angry people?
Oops. Let's see. How did they react to the shouting?
Yeah, to large groups of angry, shouting people outside their walls.
Probably kind of took cover and had their people call their people and met in the middle.
Yeah. So have you ever been in a place where you felt you were unsafe because of the actions of others?
Yes. When all the stuff was going on here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because that was around near your house.
When all the
Downtown.
yeah, there was fires and everything. You could see downtown where they had smashed stuff up.
I had that experience when I was 14. The riots in Detroit were for the most part on the west side, and we lived on the east side. But at the same time, you could hear police sirens in our neighborhood, and every now and then you could hear gunshots. And after 2 weeks of being isolated in the house and not allowed to go anywhere. We were finally able to drive to church, and a whole bunch of the businesses on the main street 2 blocks from our house had been burned out. And you don't know what's going on, and you really do feel a sense of fright and out of controlness when there's outside shouting and anger, and you're not a part of that. Then you don't know what to do with it. You know? So that's kind of the response of Balak in seeing this crowd as a horde threatening his country. To him, it was like he was trapped, and all these people were showing up, and he had to do something. So, lesson number 2, the world fears us. Large crowds of those who have a different opinion than we have creates a sense of apprehension, and we create apprehension in others. When we loudly proclaim our beliefs, someone will feel threatened. When we quietly gather and worship, someone will feel threatened. When we wear a rainbow flag, bracelet, or cap, someone will feel threatened. When we profess the name of Jesus, someone will feel threatened. And I think that a lot of times people kind of read the Bible and it's like, oh yeah, I'm on the good guy's side, and nothing's going on with that's all the bad guys, and not recognizing that there's a lesson on both sides. Sometimes they feel threatened by you as much as you feel threatened by them. So, defending the land. Balak was a king of Moab, described in the book of Numbers in the Hebrew Bible, where his dealings with the prophet Balaam are recounted. He tried to engage Balaam for the purpose of cursing the migrating Israelite community. And this is the migrating community. They're all carrying their luggage on their shoulders. He knew the story of Gideon, who led 300 Israelites to defeat the entire army of the Midianites. And you might remember that in our most conservative estimate, we said there may have been 500 fighting men in the group that Balak saw near Moab. So 20,000 people, but only 500 of them actually fighting men. A bunch of them children and women and old people, and it was a whole community. The king never questioned why Balaam's blessings worked. It just never occurred to him to ask that. In the past, Balaam had indicated one group or another would prevail in various conflicts, and his prophetic word had been correct. In his role as king, protector, and leader of the people, Balak thought he could command a blessing and get what he wanted. So the elders of Moab and the elders of Midian departed with the fees for divination in their hand. So that's the first thing that struck me, was that it was the elders of 2 communities, Moab and Midian. Okay, they put together some fees, and their fees for divination. It wasn't just an offering to the Lord. It was, we're buying your blessing. We're buying your cursing of those people. We want you to say a curse, and we're going to pay for it. So that's the first thing they did wrong. They went expecting to buy God's actions. So Balaam rose in the morning and said,
action.
Huh? Would you say?
I was like, how do you buy actions?
Well,
how do you buy actions?
Well, they wanted to pay Balaam so that Balaam would say, these people are cursed, and they'll go away. Kind of like, I don't know, how do you buy, like paying for a mercenary army, except they figured his word was strong enough they could pay for his word. Does that make sense?
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that's basically what they thought. And so Balaam, he slept, and then he rose in the morning, and he said to the princes of Balak, the people, the elders of Moab and the elders of Midian, go to your own land for the Lord has refused to let me go with you. Now, that was a clear message. So the princes of Moab rose and went to Balak and said, Balaam refuses to come with us. They didn't say, the Lord told Balaam not to come with us. They merely said, Balaam refuses. We took him money and he refused to come. So there's some translation being left out here. Now, seers that did not serve the one true God did sell their divination services regularly. That was their profession. So, the ones that would cast the bones, they would sell their services, cast the bones, and tell you what you wanted to hear. Kind of like going to the fair and having the gal read the crystal ball, and she has some casual conversation that says, oh, I think there's somebody in your future, and you go, really? And they go, yes, I think that's it. And then you go, a guy? And you say, yes, I think it's a guy. Wait a minute, is he older or younger? Oh, look, younger. Maybe he's a son or a nephew. And they're just going by your expressions and your responses. But you paid for that, so that's what you got. It's not unusual to request these services, and it was common to listen to seers who provided additional validation for the governing powers. They made it sound like, oh yes, not only did your leader say, but the seer over there agreed with him. It's implied that Balaam sought the Lord's will in prayer overnight. It started out, it said, Balaam rose in the morning. This is verses 13 to 14. So Balaam rose in the morning and said, go to your own land, for the Lord has refused to let me go with you. So the implication there is that Balaam went to his quarters and took the time to ask God, what do you want me to do with this request? And then he reported what the Lord told him, not to go to Balak, and the princes reported that he refused to go. So when you make a stand for God, that doesn't mean that somebody's going to recognize that as a stand for God. They might just say, she refused. She wouldn't do it. She just turned her back on me, instead of, she prayed about it and God wouldn't direct her in that direction. So what alternatives to God's guidance have you experienced in your life?
Well, I was guided into teaching the kids. And because I was praying on it, but I had a gut reaction or a gut feeling that that's what I was supposed to do.
Have you ever had a time when there was
and when I
go this way and go that way came at the same time?
Yes. So I had to pray double hard on which one he was telling me to do. And one time it was do both of them and be happy.
All right.
Do what you need.
So, sometimes you have to wonder, how do I make my decision? How do I decide which thing is it I'm supposed to do in this instance? And the question is, what's influencing your decision? Are you being influenced by, oh, this would be fun? Just like Pastor Jim always says, he wanted to be sent to Hawaii, but he was sent to Africa. There's a place you want to go, and I'd love to be in ministry over there. And God says, no, I need you in ministry over here. So it's kind of that kind of thing. Sometimes you have to really check your motives. Why is it that I'm pushing? Why am I leaning this way? Oh, because it's comfortable, it'll be relaxing, it's safe, it's still part of America. But God is saying, go that way. I went on this mission trip, but I think I mentioned it before. Before I went on the mission trip, there were about 14 people scheduled to go through Mexico to Guatemala. And Bob was collecting people from different churches to be a part of this ministry. And his goal was to get people who understood disability, because he wanted to see what services were there and what could be offered to the people there that we could offer. And as we approached the date, he would let me know, oh, this person dropped out for that reason. This person dropped out for that reason. We finally got down to a point, and I said to my pastor's wife, there's Bob, and there's Herb, and there's me, and we're supposed to meet somebody in Texas. I said, so it's like a bunch of guys and me, but I'm not getting a sense that I shouldn't go. And that's really all I had to go on. It's like, I'm not getting a sense that there's something wrong with this. It's just something narrowed it down to a small core. So she says, if you're not getting a check on it, go. So I did go. And Bob and Herb were in the front seat, and we had the station wagon laid down in the back with at the very back end, milk crates full of food and stuff that we were taking with us. And on the floor of the station wagon, boxes all the way across the floor of little mini Spanish Bibles. And over that, several layers of blankets, and then me sitting there with my legs stretched out and my skirt spread out and reading my Bible or a book or whatever. And turns out that in Latin America, it's very convenient to have a lady sitting on top of the contraband, because nobody asks you to get out and nobody looks to see what's in there. Because you're not supposed to carry Bibles into Mexico. We weren't leaving them in Mexico, but we weren't supposed to be bringing them through either. So even though they were in Spanish. Yeah, so it was right for me to be there at that time. The ministry that we did was really good. We met some wonderful people in different places in Mexico, as well as in Guatemala, which was our ultimate destination. And the guy that was supposed to meet us in Texas at the last minute called and said he couldn't meet us because he broke his leg, and his doctor said it had not been enough time. He might get a blood clot flying to Texas to meet us. So he couldn't come either. So there you go. Two guys and me went all the way down, all the way back. No bad things happened, and a lot of ministry was done. So yeah, so sometimes you have to, figure out, well, is there a block or is there not a block? And sometimes it's subtle. Let me see, I had another question here. Do you know any subtle temptations that may go unnoticed as they draw people away from God's guidance?
For ourselves personally?
For you or for somebody else?
Okay.
I think for me, I think too much about it. If I think too much about it, then I come up with all these excuses in my head.
Yeah,
if I just go with the flow, take it as it goes, it's what God wants you to do, it works out a whole lot better.
Yeah. So lesson 3 for this lesson is, often the distractions of the enemy are subtle and can seem to be our own thoughts, encouraging us to weigh our options rather than listen to the Holy Spirit and our knowledge of God's word. And that's really what you just described.
I get that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, so back to Balaam. Maybe God changed his mind. Think God changed his mind? In the very next verses, 15
God
and
doesn't
16.
ever change his mind.
Says, once again, Balak sent princes, more princes this time, and more honorable than the first group. So he stepped it up a little bit. Oh, well, he didn't respond to them. Let's get the guys that wear the really nice clothes. You guys go this time. And they came to Balaam and they said to him, thus says Balak, the son of Zippor, let nothing hinder you from coming to me. But Balaam answered and said to the servants of Balak, though Balak were to give me his house full of silver and gold, I could not go beyond the command of the Lord my God to do less or more. So that seems like a pretty firm response. And God came to Balaam at night and said to him, if the men have come to call you, rise, go with them, but only do what I tell you. So Balaam rose in the morning and saddled his donkey and went with the princes of Moab. So it's like, wait a minute, what happened to that really firm speech the night before? It's like, maybe he changed his mind.
I worked on it tonight.
Yes. So we see that Balaam was approached the second time. He stated his refusal, but there's a difference in how he responded. His first response firmly stated, the Lord has refused. His second response was more wishy-washy, even if I could not. So it's like, even if you gave me a house full of silver and gold, but you know, I might be persuaded. It's kind of, he left an opening. And when you leave an opening, you don't even know that you've cracked your own resolve when you do that. But when you leave an opening like that, it's like, uh-oh, I might slip, I might go. So his second response sowed some doubt as to his conviction. And it's almost as if he's inviting God to give him some wiggle room. Now, if you contrast that with Gideon's action, Gideon, remember I told you the Midianites had actually already beaten the Israelites. Their soldiers went out and beat them and said, yeah, we won this war. And Gideon heard God say, get 300 soldiers and go out to battle. And he said, whoa, wait a minute. We just lost the battle. We're not in a position of power. We were just beat. Let me pray about this. So first, Gideon sought God's guidance. And then he said, let me offer a sacrifice to the God that guides my actions. So he offered a sacrifice. And then he thought, you know, I wonder if we lost because we had these idols in the camp. Let's tear those down. So he tore down the idols that distracted the people from the one true God. Then he followed the instructions to return that focus of the people to the one true God. And he took 300, no more, because God said only take 300 men. And he followed God's direction and defeated the enemy. There was no hedging of his bets. He just knew right away. He says, okay, God, this is what I'm hearing you say. Okay, let me sacrifice to you. Okay, let me tear down the idols. There's not going to be any distraction of these other idols. Okay, we're going. We're going for it wholehearted.
Yeah.
Balaam's case, Balak sent a more worthy bribe, and Balaam was torn between pleasing God and pleasing the king. There are no split decisions with God. You don't get to, well, maybe, well, maybe that. No, it's straight one way. So my next questions. What situations have you entered thinking easy, only to find you had not considered all the facts?
Oh, there's been a lot.
Only one?
That's funny. Tracy says
Go ahead,
only
Kathy.
one. Kathy says there's been a lot.
I don't know. Go ahead, Tracy, while I compare my thoughts to my other thoughts.
I got to compare my voices. Let's see. Can you repeat that again?
Sure. And if it's not something you want to share on camera, you don't have to. What situations have you entered thinking easy, only to find you had not considered all the facts? just the fact that you faced those situations is good enough for the next question. Did you recover from that mistake? Thinking easy, and then realizing you hadn't considered all the facts. And if you did recover, how did you recover from that mistake?
Well, when I was becoming clerk, I was thinking, oh, that's easy. I just have to take notes. Well, yesterday I was doing, the recording stopped.
Yeah, go ahead. I meant
and last night, after I finally got everything typed up and put in perspective, I was dreaming about it. I was like, okay, so I guess that's recovering from it, with getting it done and staying on top of everything.
Yeah.
I think mine, the one that I remember the most was when I first started driving people, Eagle's Wings ministry. I thought about it, and I know God wanted me to do that, but I thought, okay, you pick them up, you take them there, you wait for them, you bring them back, and no. I forgot all about the 7 o'clock appointments and the 5 o'clock appointments and the distance from here to Mesa and here to wherever the heck they were supposed to go. And it took me a while to get into that groove. And once I got into the groove and that disappeared, then it was okay. You just went into it knowing this is what you had to do.
Yeah. Have you ever heard God's direction and then found yourself only going part of the way to do the Creator's will?
Yes. And that's all I got to say on that.
All right. So here's just a real world scenarios without even naming it. But how does partial commitment work in the real world? Like at work, can you turn in half a report? At school, can you turn in half a homework assignment? At church,
put the other half on
layaway? Half a ministry.
Right.
So the wrong approach can spell disaster. Not so much.
Yeah.
Let's see here.
That's right.
Okay. Here we are. Oh, well, let me go back one click so you can actually see what it said there. Where can I move me? There. The elders of Moab and Midian left, taking with them the fee for divination. When they came to Balaam, they told him what Balak had said. So that's what we've been reading through, as all of that. And now we get to Balaam's actual traveling on the road. Bloop. God's anger was kindled.
Is that your picture?
No.
My picture.
That's not one I took, no. That's one I searched for. But Balaam, God's anger was kindled because Balaam went. And so there's the first thing. You said I could go, yeah, but I told you twice not to. And then the angel of the Lord took his stand in the way. Now, it's interesting because we always hear this and we know that the angel stopped and the donkey stopped and Balaam pushed the donkey forward and the donkey stopped again. But if you read this, there's a lot of detail in there. It says when he was riding on the donkey and his 2 servants were with him, and the donkey saw the angel of the Lord standing in the road with a drawn sword in his hand, and the donkey turned aside out of the road and went into the field. So that's the first thing he did, is he went into the field. I'm not going up that road, there's an angel there. And you know what Balaam did? He hit the donkey to turn her onto the road.
Yes, he did.
That's one.
That's not.
Yeah, then the angel of the Lord stood in a narrow path between the vineyards with a wall on either side. And when the donkey saw the angel of the Lord, she pushed against the wall and pressed Balaam's foot against the wall, so he struck her again. So you can see kind of how it's kind of mounded up and rocky to one side. If he pushed aside trying to get a squeeze pass, and your foot's there because you're sitting on that donkey, it's like, ow, what are you doing? So Balaam hit him again, or her, say female donkey. And then the angel of the Lord went ahead and stood in a narrow place where there was no way to turn either to the right or to the left. And that's actually why I got this picture, because there's stuff right up to the donkey's withers on both sides. There's nowhere to turn. And when the donkey saw the angel of the Lord, she lay down under Balaam. And Balaam's anger was kindled, and he struck the donkey with his staff. 3 times the donkey tried to warn him, and 3 times he struck the donkey. Then, this is when the donkey gets the ability to speak. It's not like she was always a talking donkey. Because then the Lord opened the mouth of the donkey, and she said, "What have I done to you that you have struck me these 3 times?" And Balaam said to the donkey, "Because you have made a fool of me, I wish I had a sword in my hand, for then I would kill you." And the donkey said to Balaam, "Am I not your donkey, on which you have ridden all your life long to this day? Is it my habit to treat you this way?" And he said, "No." So, sometimes we want to get mad at the messenger, not recognizing that this messenger has never steered me wrong.
Right.
Why am I getting mad at them just because I don't like what they had to say? Maybe I need to be thinking about what they said. We learned on Palm Sunday.
Paying attention.
We learned on Palm Sunday that the donkey was a timid animal, not associated with charging into battle or standing up for a cause. I think Pastor Rob told us that that was why Jesus didn't ride in on a horse. He rode in on a timid animal that would only go where it was led. We always hear the story of Balaam's ass refusing to move forward, thinking that he's pretty brave and just mean and stubborn. But, besides that fact, he saw a blocked path. We know that. But what else was going on? So I broke it down. First time the angel stood in the way, and the donkey avoided the angel by going into the field. And the first warning he got was he was struck, or she got. I got to remember it's a female donkey. The second time, the angel was between the vineyards with walls. So the donkey pressed against the wall to squeeze around. The donkey tried really hard to do what Balaam expected. And Balaam's foot got squished against the wall, so he struck her again. It's like, wait a minute. I tried to keep going like you asked me to, and you hit me again. And then the third time, the angel stood in a narrow way with no room to turn around, and the donkey just laid down. It's like, I am giving up. And again, Balaam struck the donkey. Balaam could not see a problem in the road. Balaam did not think to check the donkey for problems causing her to stop. He could have gotten off and checked her feet and checked her withers and checked to see if there was anything like a snake in the grass or anything. He didn't check anything. He just hit her.
Right.
And then Balaam became frustrated and took his frustration out on the donkey instead of seeking a clear view of what was ahead. What happens when the road before you is blocked? Do you stop and figure out what's going on? Why is this happening? Or do you just get, why is this road blocked up? What's with this traffic? Why can't I get through? Is there a reason the road is blocked?
Okay, mine is, I get upset when it's blocked, but then I'm like, okay, it's for a reason. Stop and look and listen to your whereabouts.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Yep, I agree.
But I'm not going to hit another car or animal because I'm an animal lover.
And then do barricades that arise before you stop you from doing what you want to do?
that is just like, to me, it's common sense that God's telling you something, where the Holy Spirit is.
Mm-hmm.
There's a reason there's that block. There's a reason.
And how often do you pause to consider whether your path is aligned with God's will for your life?
That's just, I ask him.
I think that's the lesson
Yep.
that people should get from this story, is that before pushing through, we need to seek to understand the reason for the blockage. Because sometimes there's a
Yes.
reason that we're standing still. And that could be, it could be a physical thing. It could be totally spiritual. It could be, I feel like I'm praying and I'm not getting anywhere right now. Maybe that's because you need to be listening. Maybe it's because right now is a
Yeah.
time of just meditating and growing in God before you ask for the answer to that question. You know, maybe the answer is not yes or no. Maybe the answer is later. And you need to learn
Yeah.
how to wait for that right moment. Let's see.
I agree.
Not once, not twice, but 3 times. So Numbers 22 says, the Lord opened the eyes of Balaam, and he saw the angel of the Lord standing in the way with his drawn sword in his hand, and he bowed down and fell on his face. So there, Balaam says, whoa, I have done the wrong thing this time. Let me repent. That's the first thing. And when the angel says,
Okay.
why have you struck your donkey these 3 times? Behold, I've come out to oppose you because your way is perverse before me. The donkey saw me and turned aside before me these 3 times. These 3 times. If she had not turned aside from me, surely just now I would have killed you and let her live. So sometimes that blockage is your protection.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think, I was on the freeway Monday, I guess, Tuesday. Pastor Charlotte picked me up from the airport Monday, and I drove back up here Tuesday. And I ran a bunch of errands first, and then I got on the freeway and proceeded to spend at least a half hour trying to get from Costco past Happy Valley. So, you know, from
Oh,
Union
geez.
Hills to Happy Valley, that's like 2 miles. It was a really, really
Oh, yeah, that's crazy.
long delay. And then once the delay started moving, it was a really slow process. And even first, the map told me to get off in Happy Valley, and then it changed its mind and said, "Nah, stay here. This is the fastest route," because probably everyone getting off couldn't get back onto the freeway either. Finally, when we got onto the first mountain, it was clear that I didn't want to be up there any sooner anyway, because somebody's RV was a few pieces of metal and a lot of burned out nothing. And it was, you know, not
Oh,
one of those 30
goodness.
footers. It was a smaller one, but there was no motor, there was no cab, there was no inside. There was just a little bit of metal and a lot of ash. And it's like, oh, well, no wonder we've been standing still. They've been waiting to put this fire out. You know, so sometimes that blockage there is there for your protection. And, you know, we want the traffic to always go our way, but sometimes that's not your way. Danger, danger.
Yeah.
So Balaam answered the angel and he said, I have sinned, for I did not know that you stood in the road against me. Now, therefore, if it is evil in your sight, I will turn back. Because remember, he shouldn't have been on that road in the first place. But the angel told him, go with the men, but speak only the word that I tell you. None of this hedging about, and, well, yeah, even if, and no, just say what I say, don't say anything more. So the angel came to stop Balaam from going forward and to give Balaam a stern warning. Numbers 23, 18, 19, and 26. Balaam took up his discourse and said, Rise, Balak, and hear. Give ear to me, O son of Zippor. God is not man that he should lie, or a son of man that he should change his mind. So, remember I asked you that earlier. Did God change his mind? Well, before this, Balaam didn't know God didn't change his mind. Now he's pretty sure. Yep, he's not man. He's not the son of man. He does not change his mind. Has he said, and will he not do it? Or has he spoken, and will he not fulfill it? But Balaam answered Balak, Did I not tell you all that the Lord says that I must do? So there he's clarifying again. I am not going to do what you want just because you want something. I'm going to only do what God has told me to do. Mm-hmm. And in the next chapter, chapter 24, Numbers 24, Balak's anger was kindled against Balaam, and he struck his hands together. And Balak said to Balaam, I called you to curse my enemies, and behold, you have blessed them these 3 times. So what 3 times? The first time when he said, I can't go with you. The second time when he said, well, I can't do more than what God says. And the third time when he says, absolutely, God has not changed his mind. He blessed the Israelites. And Balaam said to Balak, Did I not tell your messengers whom you sent to me, if Balak should give me his house full of silver and gold, I would not be able to go beyond the word of the Lord to do either good or bad of my own will. What the Lord speaks, that will I speak. That is what he had to do. He had to be firm and he had to be consistent. And that's what I think we need to learn. Our lesson here, God answered Balaam. Balaam hedged and went to Balak anyway. And then God reemphasized his word and did not change his mind. And Balaam reemphasized his earlier message that he had sent to Balak, but reemphasized it in person. And
yes,
these 3 times. Twice Balaam said no. Then he traveled to Balak and told him once again, no. No, I am not going to bless your armies against these people. No, I am not going to curse those people. No, no matter how much silver and gold you offer, I will not curse those people. 3 times Balaam struck the donkey, like banging his head against the wall. Why don't you go? Boom, why don't you go? Boom, come on, get up and go. 3 is the number of completion or perfection. The message was complete and perfect all 3 times. So our final thoughts for us, the lesson is to listen to the Holy Spirit. If necessary, if you're praying for something major and you're not sure which way to go, write down what you get in prayer. Write it down in a notebook so you can refer back to it when you're tempted to hedge. Because, you might think you heard something different next week and you go back and go, oh, no, that is what he said. So write it down and then stand firm. And that is today's lesson on the blocked path.